Okay, let's get started. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar. My name is Michael Pagel, the Program Manager of Greening Healthcare, and today's webinar is hospital case studies. So today we'll be learning about case studies of successful hospital conservation efforts from St. Mary's General Hospital, as well as Alberta Health Services, featuring the Medicine Hat Regional Hospital. This is actually a continuation from a webinar we did a couple of months ago where we featured two other case studies from Island Health in BC and Trillium Health Partners, and we basically just didn't have enough time. We wanted to feature these two stories also, but we didn't have enough time in an hour to try to force that in. So here we go with an unscheduled webinar to end out the year. We're partnered with CHES, the Canadian Healthcare Engineering Society, and I want to thank our industry members and sponsors, Belimo, Blackstone Energy Ecosystem, PCL Construction, Elliston, Enbridge, Smith & Anderson, Thermogenic Boilers, and TMP. Greening Healthcare is a program of the Climate Challenge Network, and EnerLife provides the technical direction of the program. For any questions that you might have for our speakers today, please use the Q&A to submit your questions and try to get them in early. If we get a lot of questions right at the end or when we're just finishing up, we don't really have enough time to address them. And as always, this presentation and recording of the webinar will be posted to our site at greeninghc.com later this week, and you can check out all of our other in-person events or webinars that have been recorded throughout the year. And before we get into it, we'll just start with the land acknowledgement. We acknowledge with respect the ancestral and unceded territory of the Inuit, Métis, and First Nations people that share these lands with us. While we meet today on a virtual platform, I'm speaking from the traditional homes of the Huron-Wendat, Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabe, and the Mississaugas of the Credit River. We hope that this work contributes to our common responsibility as stewards of the environment. And with that, I will hand it over to Amandeep Deal to kick off the first case study, St. Mary's General Hospital.
Thanks, Michael. Thanks, everyone, for joining this afternoon and this morning. These two case studies are important in an aspect that we sometimes, or we generally talks about theory and how things needs to be implemented, and these are sort of the work that you will be seeing today that have resulted in theories being implemented into and making actual practical savings at the meter for these two case studies. There are different approaches, different lessons learned, but the goal is still the same: to reduce energy and emissions in the healthcare facilities. And how they've been tackled, we'll talk about all of that today. St. Mary Hospital started this journey, and before I introduce the panel, I have a couple of slides to share with you. So they started this journey back in 2019 when they looked at their sort of the benchmarking positioning, and also decided to see what they could do. And as you could see that by implementing this project, which we'll talk about in a second, they moved their benchmarking positioning from compared against the peers in that network. So each of these bars represents the total energy use of each of the hospitals, and you can see the positioning of St. Mary in 2019 and how it improved in 2023 as a result of this project. What also happened, and you probably have seen these charts in Greening Healthcare, is we do savings potential on each of the hospitals, and any hospital listening in today, whether you're a Greening Healthcare member or you're a non-member, if you don't have this positioning, or if you don't know where you belong in this chart, I would highly recommend you to reach out to Michael, and he can provide you that information. So at least it will help you set the stage for knowing where your facility is currently when compared against other peers, and how much savings potential do you have for your facility, and how to target that through the approaches that we're going to talk through or cover through these case studies. So as you can see, back in 2019, St. Mary was already one of the sort of the energy higher sort of energy energy efficient side with a savings potential of 10.6, and they, by kind of implementing this project, they have now scaled up to top of the benchmarking chart on the savings potential here. Again, each of the bar presents here the total savings potential for each of those sites that are listed in this chart. As you could see, you've probably seen these charts in the past. So the blue dot, it's the actual electricity meter consumption data on the left-hand side. And then the red dot is a normalized baseline. And then you can see the graph on the right is the gas, which is blue dots is actual gas consumption at the meter, and red is normalized baseline. Anytime the blue dot is below the red dot, that's the savings. So this project, when kind of, as you could see, resulted in 2023 savings of around $200,000 in sort of utility cost savings as a result of the implementation project. We'll touch on a bit, as you could see on the gas side, the savings in the sort of the last few months have decreased. And there's a story to that, and we'll have Jonathan cover that piece as well today. And it's important piece of the story is to make sure that there are M&Vs in place that will help you kind of detect these and also help you overall maintain the success of the projects throughout the term of the project. Similarly, there are measures that have been done as a result of the water savings, 30 or 29.6% water savings have been achieved through this project, and we'll talk more about that as well in this case study. With that, let me introduce the panel. So we have today three panelists here: Roger Hollis, Jonathan Wilkie, and Tim Schneider. Maybe we'll start with Roger's quick introduction from you, Jonathan, followed by Tim, and then I'll get into the questions about the case study and how you guys are able to achieve great results through this.
So I'll keep it fairly brief in that I suspect a fair number of people know me through my many years in chess. So I was the one that initiated this way back in 18 through to 19, and then after 20 years at St. Mary's, I did retire, but I retired from St. Mary's, not healthcare. So I continue to be very active with CSA, chess, and helping other hospitals with their operation efficiency. So I'm out of St. Mary's, but I'm still lingering.
Thanks, Roger. Jonathan?
I'm John Wilkie, manager of St. Mary's Hospital. I'm currently here. I've been manager here since 2020, and I've been with the organization since 2015. So I've seen it from both sides of it as we've worked under Roger and alongside Roger for many years. It's a great guy to work with.
Thanks, John. Tim?
Hi, everyone. Tim Schneider, Blackstone. I'm the president of Blackstone's Energy Solutions business. I've been with Blackstone now 9 years, leading the development and expansion of our energy services business. I've been doing large-scale energy as a service in performance contracting in both Europe, the US, and Canada. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Let me take this back to Roger. Roger, you were the pioneer in this project, and maybe can you help us walk us through what were your primary goals for this project, and what were some of the specific challenges were you trying to address through this project?
So before I answer that, I think I want to put some context to it, what was going on back in 2019. This is all pre-COVID, but the conditions I'm going to speak to, I think, exist today. So I don't know exactly where we are with the conditions I'm going to reference, but I suspect that they're probably all the same. So back then, HEAP had just been canceled. For those of you who are old enough, that was a Liberal program for Energy Improvement Initiative. HERF was around, but it was predominantly, unless you funded your own stuff, it was the only way to get infrastructure money, and was a good program, but was then, and I suspect today is still underfunded relative to the demand of Ontario's province. Ourselves, I'm going to assume everyone knows what a facility condition index is. Ontario had undergone a number of audits, and the St. Mary's experience was that my overall FCI was 0.45, which is, anyone that knows the scale knows that I'm a hair's breadth from taking a wrecking ball to this thing because everything is so old. My deferred maintenance back in 19 was almost $70 million. So when I'm getting my annual HERF check for $1 million against a deficit of 65, it barely even moves the needle. So I've got a severe infrastructure issue. I suspect that to varying degrees, I suspect that those conditions remain today. Infrastructure is one of the few areas of the hospital that has very limited funding sources. Basically, you fund it yourself, or you get it through HERF, which is an Ontario Hospital Infrastructure Renewal Program, and that's basically it. Where a lot of these other infrastructures, greenhouse gas and energy, often have numerous funding sources from private sector that come and go, Enbridge, Sofiac, on it goes. So in that context, the goals that I was trying to do is certainly cost reduction, just because they were basically financially driven, cost reduction, and I need an alternate way to chip away at this ridiculously brutal deferred maintenance of $70 million. Greenhouse gas initiatives, the notion was out there. Everyone conceptually, philosophically agrees with, but certainly in my area, when it came to putting money down for it, no one was interested in doing anything for greenhouse gas in the program. So those were the key goals. Of what are my options for chipping in, supplementing HERF, and getting a better handle on my financial operating costs. So those were the big drivers.
Thanks, Rogers. I think, and there are a lot of people on the call that could sort of attest to that. The healthcare sector in general struggles with a similar issue that you mentioned, and it needs a unique approach sometimes to solve it. And you try to apply that through this project. Maybe can you walk us through some of the project scope, the anticipated savings, and how did you come up with the scope? You kind of touched on that. Part of that was to address your deferred maintenance issues in the facility. And this needed a unique approach. Maybe can you talk about the project scope, and then also were there any outcomes attached with that?
So I'll keep the project scope and the savings fairly short, because I think the more useful element is the stuff we're going to talk about after this. I'm not going to go through all the elements. We've seen them all at different combinations, so I'm not going to go through every one of these things. This is common within that. That said, I'm going to go down bottom right-hand corner. The project cost. The project, it shows up as two segments, 3.5 and $1 million, but really the project was $4.5 million, because we decided, I'm not going to get into the financial, but at the end of the day, the hospital decided to take out our own loan for the project. So the project, the contract is for $4.5 million. I'll get to the background of how we got there, but my CFO at the time said, why don't we increase the scope of it so that we can get some infrastructure renewal stuff in there. So that's why you see that from a guaranteed savings perspective, that comes from the 3.5 conservation measures. So all the performances that you saw in the earlier graphs, those are predicated on the things we did through the scope of work 3.5. And those are the things you see on the screen there. The 1 million was really essentially a slush fund for infrastructure renewal. We had a few elements that we'd earmarked. We went through our Nadine and our VFA audits and say, okay, what are the things that are going to shut the hospital down? Boilers, softeners, AHUs, you name it, they're on the list. So we did some high level stuff, and we have a bit of a shopping list of things that we would upgrade, replace via that 1 million infrastructure renewal pool. I think that's the way to look at it. But the project in itself was, the loan was 4.5.
Thanks, Roger. And yeah, you're right. I think the scope of work is kind of very similar in terms of what we talked about generally in a lot of these facilities that need a savings potential that sort of highlights the operational improvements along with the capital infrastructure renewals. Now, you mentioned there's guaranteed savings as a part of this project, which from my experience needs a lot of heavy lifting at the front and also through the process. And even after the project is complete, there's M&V work involved. So maybe if you can walk us, how was that for you, the initial stage setting for this project, talking to your management around, giving them the comfort around that this is the process we have put in place that will ensure that the savings materialize and that will ensure that you have the means to do the M&V and everything that's needed for these kind of contracts. So if you can walk us through that, like what were your initial steps in getting that framed, and was there any pushbacks from your management around your proposals?
So I'm gonna take that question, go back one further, because if the C-suite and the board has no appetite for taking out a 4.5 million loan, then it doesn't really much matter what happens at my level or below. So I spent a lot of time with the CFO, who was very good, our C-suite and the board, and always going back to our FCI and the long list of mission critical infrastructure items that were beyond life and would shut various acute portions of our hospital down. And they were familiar with the Nadine reports, the VFI reports, and they understood how FCI worked, and certainly it woke them up and say, okay, upon reviewing of our HERF funding schedule, going, this is not sustainable. We need to do something else. So that cleared the way for me to then negotiate something. So I had done some preliminary work with the Siemens and the Honeywells of the world, and the first thing I did was, because at that time it was kind of hit and miss as to how well these ESCO projects worked, and I was interested in learning, okay, when these things go a little south, why do they go south? So I would meet with the Luis Rodriguez's and the folks at Siemens and go, I don't want to, what makes a good ESCO, if you will, and what makes a bad one? Because whatever bad happened, I'm not interested in replicating that. And so I'd done quite a bit of homework in terms of, and a lot of this had to do with making sure that the metrics and the calculations behind it, and we may touch upon, I think we're going to touch upon this a little bit later, work for both sides of the equation. As far as engagement with my staff, and it goes to the infrastructure renewal portion of it. It's hard to get the boiler guy interested in energy savings when he's working on a piece of crap and he's running out of duct tape because the last pallet of duct tape is late. Like, he's not, no one's interested in saving water through toilets when I've got a water softener system that's ready to collapse. So what's in it for them? How does this make their day better? Because energy savings in of itself doesn't make any of their jobs easier. So it's through by leveraging the infrastructure renewal part, saying, if we get along with this, then we'll replace that air handling unit that's doing this, and John will speak to some of the. So that was key in terms of what's in it for them.
Okay, cool. I'll come back to the Rogers, to the financial and the contractual sort of piece. Let me bring in Tim, and I'm just switching the order here. Let me bring in Tim onto the conversation. Tim, you guys are the ESCO partners in this. There's definitely lessons learned on every project and the recommendations. There are many hospitals, looking at this as thinking about it, whether this is the path they should take or other paths. Specifically from this project, working with Rogers and his team, what were some of the lessons learned? I know Roger put you through a lot of due diligence in this project. We'll talk about that. But what were some of the lessons learned that you recommend to the hospitals or to the people that are on this call that are trying to understand ESCOs and these projects better?
Thanks, Amandeep. Yeah, I mean, I think a lot, the ESCO model is a very mature model. Canada was one of the early adopters of performance contracting back in the early 80s. So it's a pretty mature model. I think what Roger said is right. I think you need to explore your options. Trying to get structured financial transactions socialized, presented and accepted by the C-suite or CFOs or even procurement entities is always, I think that you want to do that early and build your crowd that's going to support it. And I think my lesson learned over the many decades I've done this is it's absolutely essential to think about this as a competing business case for other investments that the hospital needs to make, and make sure that investment is well understood and the benefits are well understood and articulated with unshakable facts, as Roger mentioned with FCI or these days with greenhouse gas reductions. Make sure the facts are ticking the box for the C-suite, the board, and then further, again, supporting what Roger said. It's really important to engage not only the C-suite early, but engage your entire team, including your suppliers, to make sure everybody's aware and everybody's bought in. And it's exciting when you see that you've got senior management support and all of the capital projects that continuously get submitted and turned down or moved from A's to B's to C class capital expenditures. It's exciting to see, as a leader in Roger's case and Jonathan's case, actually lift the morale and help the team resolve these problems that frustrate them every day. So I think my message is cast the net wide, socialize the concept in the language of the stakeholders that you need to participate, and make sure it's a good investment compared with others. There's, you can be looking at scanners, you can be looking at parking lots, you can be looking at other things. And when you do that, make sure you solve the problem that most hospitals have right now, which is lack of funding to renew the infrastructure. And in many cases, if this is done properly, many projects we're doing right now, we're seeing greenhouse gas reductions of 50, 60, 70% while renewing infrastructure, while using these energy efficiency measures to fund it and create a neutral cash flow financial structure for the hospital. So really having no impact on the hospital's financial performance. So I think it's cast the net wide, have a strong business case and know that you're competing with other resources, and having the CFO lean across the boardroom table and say, Roger, John, are you okay with this? You nod, and they know they have your support. That usually is a happy day for everybody that's a stakeholder in the project.
Thanks, Tim. I think you mentioned one point that sort of touched in. I'll go to Rogers on this. Is these projects, they come with they need a clarity around scope of work, they need a clarity around financials, and they need clarity around how do you measure the savings. And I think, Roger, from your experience, you did a bit of that work. A lot of the hospitals don't have in-house expertise to understand some of the financial things that comes with these projects, and sometimes it's challenging to completely see that project through. There are certain things you've done with this projects on the financial side as a prep work to the project. Can you maybe walk us through those items, and also what was the due diligence done on to make sure that you get the right M&V in place, measurement verification in place for quantifying these savings?
So I think this is the meat, one of the big meatier parts of this presentation is what's different about this that your audience can take back and go, okay, we never really thought of that, or we downplayed that. So these are things that I know distinguish the St. Mary's experience from a lot of other ESCOs. So first and foremost, we retained an ESCO-specific lawyer. So not just any lawyer. This individual, Tim knows him very well. I later learned that he's actually one of the better energy management lawyers around. So he knew the language, he knew the financials, but he knew how to put it in the context of legalese. So that wound up being probably the best $200,000 I ever spent, was retaining him, because he stayed on right through to the end of the project and the reconciliation. So that's one. It's not a financial per se, but it goes to the efficiency of the project, and that is, I was never going to go ahead with anyone, let alone Blackstone, unless they guaranteed to have one of their individuals reside at my hospital every day working in the engineering team. And the purpose of that was to get this person climatized to our environment. He actually was assigned projects. He did projects for me. He got used to, we have a very high-end in-house real-time digital drawing system. He became familiar with that and used it because we needed that for the ESCO. We have a very elaborate CMMS system. He became instrumental in being able to use that. All this was to make him so that when we went ahead with this, I didn't have to babysit Blackstone's people every stinking day as to how stuff was supposed to work. Kurt, he's the individual, super guy. He was one of the team. He sat in on our meetings after about, he was there for 4 months prior to even going live. There was people at the hospital thought he was a St. Mary's engineering employee. That was key, because he got comfortable with the processes that we had in engineering, got comfortable with the people, and he could run stuff, and he didn't bother my guys, me, or Gerald, or anyone else, unless he actually had to. That's key. Next thing was I hired a third-party ESCO verifier. So there's companies out there, and their job was to, when we did the reconciliation, was to take the Blackstone numbers and pull them apart and confirm through their readings that these savings were legitimate. So when we did the monthly reconciliations, which is another key point, don't wait till the end of the year to do reconciliations, because then that's just a dog's breakfast. We reconciled financially monthly. So at the end of the month, we agreed, did we save money? Did we lose money, and how much? No money was transferred, but we closed that month off on paper, such that when we did the year end, you reconciled December. And once you reconcile, because you've already reconciled the previous 11, reconciling the year was real easy. So I encourage you to have a third party person that is your financial auditor. And then the last thing is we spent a lot of time, colloquially we call it MISA for Dummies, which is the Blackstone version of ESCO. And that is Tim and I spending dozens and dozens of hours going through every critical phase of the contract, including establishing equations. We have equations for every financial metric, and we did what-if analysis of if it overperforms, if it underperforms, and if there's price changes. We took all the equations we had and made sure we understood all the what-ifs, because it's all hugs and kisses when everything's going well, but as soon as the number goes south, that's when you find out if you have a good contract or not. So it was a very painful process, but the proof in the pudding was when we did the reconciliations, they were almost never contested. So that saved us a lot of time. That was money well invested. I encourage you to dig super hard into your equations and make sure you've got that. And the last thing, and then I'll attempt to not talk, is this was profit sharing as well. We were guaranteed money, but if they overperformed, we St. Mary's, we're fine with splitting the extra benefit. We're giving them an incentive to overperform. So it's not just beating up Blackstone when they do badly. We will share the extras if you do well, and I think that helped. So
Thanks, Roger. I think let me bring in quickly, John. John, you lived through this project, and implementation is always challenging an existing facility. Can you touch on some of the challenges that you faced and any recommendations you have for the folks who are thinking about it, and as well as they're operating the facility? How do you make sure that you get the benefit of both?
Well, as Roger touched on in the beginning there, this was implemented during COVID, which really magnified the difficulties in implementing some of these things. So you could imagine what it's like when a truck backs up to your dock and drops off a truckload of toilets and flush valves, and you're in the middle of COVID, and you're like, now what? You got to install these all. You got to shut down rooms. You got to shut down water. You've got to shut down air handling units for VFDs. It posed its challenges. But again, one thing that worked in our favor was the reduced number of visitors at that time made it somewhat easier to shut down some public bathrooms and things like that. But certainly that complicated things more. So an interesting one that came out of it was that once you replace all of your LED lights and install all the VFDs, as you imagine throughout the entire hospital, that's quite a large number. We ended up doing a power study due to increased brownouts and troubles on diagnostic equipment, and we observed a 5% distortion in our readings, which was causing a lot of fails on our diagnostic equipment, specifically dialysis equipment. And so we ended up installing harmonic filters on all of our major power panel distribution systems throughout the hospital. And we're back at Unity and continue to see savings, but that's definitely a consideration to take forward.
Thanks, Sean. I think we're almost out of the time. What I'm going to ask everyone is we hopefully will find some time towards the end for questions, but please send your questions in, because we plan to respond to those questions. If we can't do it today live, but we'll do that as a part of the paper out that will be sent after the webinar. Thank you again for panelists. This is really good conversations, and I know we will do more of these as we explore these models and explore these different opportunities. There's so much aging infrastructure in the existing facilities, and then using that leverage of improving the infrastructure, and as a result, you're getting energy efficiency and emissions savings out of that, is something that we look forward to on many of these projects. Thanks again for your time, and now let me take you to the next case study, which is Alberta Health Services recommissioning. So I've joined with me today is friends, Jared and Harry, and I'll do maybe if you guys want to do a quick introduction, I will get right into the case study for Alberta recommissioning project. We'll start with Harry if you are on the line.
Yep, thanks, Amandeep. So I'm part of Alberta Health Services. We are a provincial health authority here for the last 15 years or so. And our office is responsible for utilities, energy management programs provincially. Everything is centralized, and also sustainability, which includes all the clinical stuff as well in corporate.
Thanks, Harry. Friends?
Frans Diepstraten, Senior Advisor with the Office of Sustainability and Energy Management. Been with AHS since about 2015, and looking at all these photos, I think we're due for an update.
Thanks, friends. Jared?
Hi, everyone. Jared Hopper, FM&E. I'm responsible for the Southeast Zone, but Medicine Hat Regional Hospital is under, I guess, my area.
Thanks, Jared. And Jared's here will walk us through the piece around Medicine Hat. So let me get going on this. Harry, I'll bring you in. First question, can you give us a background for the folks? How did this project actually initiated, and what were some of the goals of this project were?
Well, we received some funding from the government. So like we've been doing recommissioning, for example, for over a decade, but at the beginning there was quite small numbers, so small numbers, small projects. But we received some funding from the government to create a project management office, which I was after, and also separate funding to do a study. So we were able to do a provincial audit of all of our buildings. We got just over 100 acute hospitals, and we've got also all the public health centers and EMS stations and everything. So we got a lot of infrastructure, just over 3 million square meters. And so what that study did really was to, at a high level, it's more the 30,000 foot view to see what kind of infrastructure we had, how old it was the end of life, things like, are we fully digital? Are we a mix of pneumatics and the digital, and how old is stuff? How do we connect with the system? So at a high level, we wanted to get an idea of the kind of infrastructure we had. Because we have centralized utilities, we also use a system called Energy which is a web-based utility database management system. And it manages all our utilities, but it also has a whole bunch of different modules, including benchmarking. So we could see from a benchmarking point of view who our high users are. We can categorize into different types of buildings. And so, the first thing we did was we created this report to see where our potential was.
Thanks, Harry. And I think one of the things you previously talked about is that this became kind of at the forefront because during the COVID time, you didn't have other projects to work on, just a lot of resources. Recommissioning became probably one of the also reasons the front end of this project as well.
Yeah, and that was kind of a unique situation with COVID. A lot of our non-critical projects all got canceled. We still had a budget to deal with, or try to burn off, of course, because you don't want to lose it. And so we got a bunch more money, and we really focused on buildings that were already fully digitized, and systems were not near end of life or nothing. So what we did was and we knew we cannot get access into the building, possibly the mechanical rooms, or we cannot be in the patient areas at all. So we hired the consultant, which was EnerLife. And so we did a process where we just focused really, it was recommissioned, but the strong focus was on the BMS systems, just optimizing them. It would identify other things to be done, but we knew we couldn't maybe do that at this time. And so we just focused really on trying to make sure those systems are running properly. So we had a team-based approach, which was really having the consultant, having the BMS vendor, and our facilities folks at the same table. And so the BMS folks and we would meet, depended usually every couple of weeks or monthly, just to see what these opportunities were.
Thanks, Harry. And Franz, you can always jump in if there's anything you want to contribute. The one specific thing I want to also hear from you is because you're involved in a lot of individual sites. If you any thoughts on what were some of the things that you noticed during this process that would have helpful to other people to sort of learn from it. So if you want to give a thought on that and let me know, I'll open the line for you as well. And I think, Harry, you touched on this, is that your criteria kind of based on sort of the few things, but one of them was to look at some of this higher sort of underperforming hospitals with the digital infrastructure. So this was part of your utility management plan that you could sort of benchmark each of your sites, and then some of the low performing sites with a good infrastructure were identified as a part of the process. So sorry, I didn't explain the chart. If the blue dot is your electricity consumption and the orange is your gas consumption for your different facilities. And the same, I think, principles you guys also applied on the rural side as well, where you have benchmarking for all the rural sites and then picked the sites, some of the underperforming ones with infrastructures, and then Canmore was picked because it had a good infrastructure and there's many things that could be done. But I think one of the things I want to kind of come back to this is I think your methodology around, I kind of highlighted a 2 bullet point, which stood out to me was creation of those air system layout drawings and engaging the balancing contractor sort of ahead of engaging other consultants. Maybe can you walk us through that process and maybe anything that you can share for other teams that are looking to do this kind of project, how this helped you to get better results out of this process?
Yeah, can I share my screen? I
Yeah,
click
you
that one
can.
open. Okay.
I
I'll
may
just
have
show
that.
you.
I may have that drawing in the next slide. If you're
Oh, okay.
are you looking at this one?
That's a good one. Yep. So
Okay.
what we did before anything, it's for a different building, but what we tried to do was try to give the consultant some information before they even had the initial phone call, and us. Because I find because we have so many buildings, you think that intuitively, for example, our weekly schedules are all, tight, really, because that's the easy win, right? And we very consistently find that they're not, which is a plus and a minus. It's a minus because we're wasting money, but it's a plus because they're easy savings, and when you can take those savings and roll them up into doing other things which you might not be able to afford to do. So what we had, and we were funded by the government in 2018 and created a team. I actually hired one of the team members was a draftsperson. So this is one of the things that they do. They work with the sites. So we try to identify what each air handling unit serves, and then the schedule associated with that air handling unit, and then as much information as we have on the systems. Like this one doesn't have it, but we would try to put in the airflows, and we would put in the horsepower. So like we don't have the horsepower here, but oh no, sorry, we
Oh,
do.
we do. Yeah, we do.
Yeah, sorry. And to identify whether it's got a VFD on it or it's a multi-zone or the type of system, just enough information to be able to give us and the consultant something to go from. And we also would hire a balancing contractor because they're cheap, right? And it's often hard to find a balancing report on site. And if you do find one, it's usually very old. So we would have them basically give us information just on the air handling unit. And we didn't do it in this case, but we also do with the pumping systems as well, just to see where we're at. And again, in the VAV system, it's a point in time, but at least it's a point in time, right? So it's just easy to see whether, are we over delivering by a substantial amount? Are we under delivering with some other problems? But it also is a cost-effective way to have a starting point from we're all kind of on the same page. Because some of the buildings, the air system might be 20, 30 years old, right?
Yeah, no, I think that this is in my personal recommendation. If you're a healthcare facility, and if you don't have these kind of maps in your facility, that will be the first thing to do with these projects, because that not only helps you become a resilient system, because you actually know which systems to turn off or turn on by mapping these spaces if you're doing a particular response to a pandemic, but or any other sort of catastrophic event. But having these maps for each of your site will be the starting point for your projects. We'll touch on these measures, which are covered and pretty much detailed in the Medicine Hat case study, but these are some of the measures that were applied. But I think the key thing that was done through this is the data-driven piece used to drive a lot of these measures, and we'll touch on those with the case study as well. But I'm going to sort of take this slide and ask you the question around we find, and let me just explain this first to people on the line. So these are the different sites on the left-hand side. Canmore, Medicine Hat, Northern Lights, QT, all these projects combined. The percentage savings against the baseline period. So it's everything which is in sort of dark green color is the savings, is the positive savings, and anything that you see in the red, in this case, Westview for 1 month, was 1.2%, that's the increases. But overall, this project, kind of annual basis, saved 1.4 million and 13,000 GHG emission reductions. Harry, I don't know from your scale, but from my scale, this was a successful project to achieve savings with that regards. What were some of the lessons that you could, or some of the key contributors you can kind of claim to achieve these positive outcomes on this project? Like anything that you want to share with the audience around some of the key things that built on the success of this project?
Well, I at risk of repeating myself, I would say the team-based approach helped us a lot, where we had buy-in. So when we would meet with our facilities folks, and our team is not facility-based, so our responsibility for utilities is remote of being on-site, and so we really involved our facilities folks as much as we can. They're not always involved on every project that happens on their site, but we consider them our client, even though we're the same organization. And so we would really try to find out what their pain points were operating the building, and some of those issues we could address, some we simply couldn't because it involved a large capital project which was outside of our scope. And I guess I'll talk about Medicine Hat in particular a little bit. We're very fortunate there that out of our 5 zones, our one zone has 2 individuals that are part of their job task is to become more energy efficient. And so the reason we picked Medicine Hat for a larger scale project was because that's where Jared was based, and that was part of his role. He knew the hospital. He was an HVAC tech before, so he knew the BMS system. He knew all the problems, and so that was very beneficial. When we created our team, we also hired a measurement and verification engineer, and so he worked very closely with the consultant and the site to ensure that we were getting the savings that were claimed and we could justify the savings. Yeah, and for our project, again, they're kind of around the COVID thing. Again, the bulk of our work ended up being in mechanical rooms, so it was easy to move around the project.
Thanks, Harry. And then this is some of the sort of the financial summary, and we'll have more to share on the Medicine Hat individual project. But overall, the annual savings achieved for this period sort of targeted was 17%. The annual savings achieved were 18%, and then you can see this million in sort of annual savings, 1.5 cumulative savings to date on all these sites. And some of these sites are still going through the progress. There's a bit of, I think, slowdown on finishing some of these projects due to capital constraints, as we know. But part of that, in sort of addition to the capital issues that recently came overall, like Harry, were there primary challenges that you uncovered or anything that you suggest that you probably do slightly differently to achieve even better results on this project? Like, is there anything that you could think of that some of the challenges were encountered, and then anything that would improve in the process?
Well, I suppose on some sites we weren't always given enough information. And just because our process is really long from the time we want to do a project, by the time we get the contracts written up, and again, we're engaging a consultant, so we go through that process, and then we're had to engage with everybody else, especially if it involved a bit of construction. We weren't always made aware of changes that happened on site, except for Medicine Hat. Medicine Hat was good. Yeah, and of course, through the process, you identify capital projects that become a priority for the site, but we can't deliver it. So sometimes that is seen as a failure. And also the working in buildings that either are not 100% digital or they have not been maintained properly, or kind of at end of life. A lot of recommissioning stuff really requires a significant amount of connection with the BMS system. How do we control that stuff? So if we either can't do that because the system's at end of life and you touch it, your panels are overloaded, or the components are out of life and you start touching them, it causes other problems. That's probably the biggest thing we learned.
Thanks, Harry. And again, for the audience, please pull in to chime in with the questions and we'll try to address them as we move along. So let me now bring in Jared into this conversation. Jared, you kind of manage this process from the facility side. Can you give a quick brief on this side, and then we'll dig deeper into the measures that were some of the measures that were applied here.
Yeah, for sure. You're just looking for challenges sort of thing, or?
No, just overview of the site, just to start with, like, which is kind of explained here, but so people who want to know where the medicine hat is and then what kind of facility it is.
Yeah, I guess we're based in Southern Alberta. There's kind of two major regional sites in Southern Alberta. There's the Chinook one in Medicine Hat, and I mean, it was originally started, I think, 1955. So we had kind of we have an original kind of wing, and then in 1985 we had an expansion, and then in 2018 we had another expansion. So it's kind of a pieced together building, we'll say, of different
Vintages,
different eras, right? So we've got, you know, very old pneumatic controls from 1955 to the newest wing. It's got fully digital controls. So kind of battling through that usually was part of our challenges.
and a lot of people can relate to that, because a lot of the hospitals are in that scenario, situations where they have an existing facility which hasn't been torn down, and then they get a new wing, and then now they have to sort of work through managing both of them and ensuring there's sort of good operations on both of them. But can you maybe high level, like, walk us through, and then we'll get into deeper in this, some of the measures that you guys implemented? How was the process at your site? If you can give a bit of information on that, and especially your involvement of your instrumental tech in sort of applying these measures at this site.
Yeah, for sure. You can kind of see all the different things we implemented. I mean, I think our list was probably double that or whatever of just ideas, I guess, or initiatives that might save energy from, like you said, my experience as an HVAC tech or other. We had, you know, some operators that had a lot of buy-in into this and would suggest things or email me something or an idea. And so yeah, it's definitely a team effort. And then the hardest part of it is just going through that list and trying to determine whether or not this thing's going to cost $1 million or it's going to cost, you know, a few thousand, just really determining which initiatives to kind of pursue and, you know, even cost out, right? Some of it was just eliminate them off the bat because we got to replace the millions of dollars worth of critical infrastructure. So.
And you had the same challenges with working with existing controls contractor. I mean, the good thing you had was you had your own tech who had a knowledge about the building automation systems, including yourself, right? So that, I think, to me, was also one of the factors in success at this site.
Yeah, for sure. It definitely drives down the costs of things with, you know, contracting something out versus being able to do, you know, the occupancy scheduling was a big one, being able to schedule that ourselves, kind of program that out. And we, you know, we still get the odd request to change, you know, my office hours are no longer this sort of thing. So it really has to, this kind of stuff probably needs to have some kind of an on-site rep to kind of maintain it as well, I think is part of this.
And I think Harry touched on this. This was part of the exercise that you worked with Harry's team on identifying these different zones, the hours of operations with the clinical folks, so then we can map out. And I think the way this site kind of went one step ahead, that I understand in certain departments which are considered to be 24/7, but then there are certain rooms that you're able to schedule. I remember there are certain room offices in emergency department, you were able to schedule that because there's nobody in that office, even though the department is 24/7. But that sort of due diligence that you guys and your team did, is there like maybe any things that you remember, Jared, on that sort of lessons learned on how was that process with the clinical folks, talking to them? Did you have an easy conversation with them, or there was pushback on certain departments around, well, I'm supposed to be 24/7, why are you guys changing my schedules?
Yeah, there's a lot of, I mean, that was probably the most time-consuming part, and some of it seemed, it's one room that you had to have this conversation over. But I think a lot of it, I think that was what set it up for success, was that the departments were not impacted. We tried this in other areas in the past, and even just scheduling things at the air handler level, you get more complaints and more problems out of it than it's worth. So I think, the advantage is these areas have digital boxes that control each space, and you can customize them to the person, or to that that room level kind of customization. And I think, like I said, setting it up so that they're not hot or cold and giving that hour kind of leeway in the the front and the back of their schedule, I think is key, so that essentially they don't even know that we're doing this for the most part, other than providing their feedback on what hours they worked.
So I would say that and we come back to the lessons learned and some of the success factors and challenges is sometimes, even though you kind of explain it's going to be a bit of work, sometimes until you're really in there, you don't realize how much work. Often seems to take more work than like we tend to be a little bit maybe optimistic at the beginning. So because and unfortunately, Jared was on site and knew the building, so we would have been lost without having someone who knew the site, who knew the people. We to talk to, because it would have been horrendous for some stranger to walk on site and try to connect with people, right? So it did take more work than Jared and Jared's boss maybe initially thought, which impacted some of his other work. But yeah, we relied very heavily on Jared. And sometimes, as he mentioned, you go and think, oh, it's simply, I just need to know your hours, right? And we're going to do it. And all of a sudden, there's all these, it sometimes brings up other problems then that takes some time, right? So it is with recommissioning, it is time intensive.
Thanks, Harry. I think, yeah, and then the relationship that you have with the facility and the clinical folks is always key to the success of these projects. You got to have a relationship with them to help them explain that this is not impacting them. This is an energy conservation measure. So given the time, I'm just gonna run through the couple of, I think, Jared, and I'll touch on that, and then I'll get your input. And this was one of the measures as a part of the air testing that was uncovered, that because of the return fan not operating as intended, it was trying to draw the air from the exhaust side, and which would have been otherwise not documented had the air testing sort of wasn't done to confirm that, and it was resulting in a higher outside air percentage on the system. So again, air testing was a key to this. But Jared, bringing you in here, this was another issue that was uncovered, and I think you had a bit of that knowledge from the past, but that pressurization issue was a key piece in your building.
Yeah, for sure. It was another project that uncovered it, but it becomes part of, an overall strategy of trying to recommission the building. But yeah, it's something to be mindful of. You can see the 3 different buildings there of different eras, and essentially making sure that they play nicely together. And we uncovered that our middle building was a big issue of not exactly replacing the air that it was taking out. So, something to be mindful of. Typically, when you schedule occupancy, you shut off both, but it wasn't due to that. This was due to just years of renovations and just adding exhaust fans on every project and things like that. But something to consider when you're doing things like this.
Yeah, pressurization plays a huge part in this. And enthalpy wheels, again, we talked about this in detail in other webinars. This was one of the issues that you uncovered around the preheat set points on these enthalpy wheels were set too high. There was sort of challenges with other optimizations with enthalpy wheel, which kind of helped you, once these were optimized, help you resulted in savings. This one I want to bring you in as well, just this room by room analysis of the non-critical areas to start with. Can you talk us through this process and some of the benefits of doing that?
Yeah, this was one that, we figured out through this process that we're over ventilating a lot of these spaces, often offices, locker rooms, things like that were maybe seemed like they were over designed, but part of it was that we were able to still maintain the minimum airflow, but allow the cooling aspect of it to come back down, which resulted in savings too. So I think it was important.
Yeah, that was done on a lot of the units. And then this is again a simple measure, but when you track it, it has a huge impact on your gas savings. Is that what is the minimum outsider requirements that you have for the system and how much actually outsider you're bringing? So on this graph, you could see the blue dots is the outsider percentage. It was never close to the 33% required for the system. And those were fixed as a part of the optimization to make sure that when the heating is on, you're bringing the minimum outside air, and the system could drift to an economizer mode as you don't need it. This is sort of, we looked at this, but the savings profile has been updated to July 2024. Anytime the blue is below the red, that's your savings. As you could see, that savings continued in the implementation period, and then it continues to sustain the savings for the last three years that since the implementation has been complete. And same with the natural gas, you could see that savings continue to appear and then remain sustained for the period of this time. Just quickly, any thoughts on this, Harry? The financial summary is clear. You guys put that sort of infographics on this as a success story for this project. Any sort of lessons learned or any sort of recommendations of people who are considering this project for future?
Or really clearly communicate your successes. And of course, our finance folks that control a lot of things love the numbers. So, and people in general love awards. So if you think you can get some kind of award, you know, even if it's just a paper you hang on your wall, go for it, because we've done that a number of times. And so, yeah, that kind of it generates often more questions and more interest. And
Thanks, Harry. That covers the case study for us. I'm going to pass on the mic, or sorry, not the mic, pass on the sessions to Michael for last couple of slides. Thanks everyone for hanging in there. Sorry, I know we're 1 minute over the time, but Michael, back to you.
Yeah, thanks, Amandeep. This we just include at the end always so people are aware that this is a membership-based program and there's a lot that kind of goes on behind the scenes if you just tune into webinars once every couple of months or maybe come to one of our in-person events. Whether you're a hospital organization or an industry organization, we do have different membership options, and we always do prefer to just tackle things as a group rather than everybody having to do it on their own. And we have established quite a massive network over the past 20 years. And I hope that anyone who isn't a member will at least, engage in a conversation to see if it's the right fit for them. And then our website will have our events coming up for 2025, probably within the next month or so, maybe a little bit into the new year. All of our events will be listed. And if you want to reach any of the Greening Healthcare team, that's all of us there. There's Ian, Heather, myself, Michael Pagel, and Amandeep. And that's the end of our webinar. So I hope everyone has happy and safe holidays, and we'll see you back in the new year. Thanks. Bye.